Hello, and welcome to Crunch and Chaos. As always, I'm joined by Jay across the table.
Hi.
And I am your host, Nick. And today, we are going to be talking about the Vault Tour. We were both at Adepticon.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, you want to talk a little bit about why you were at Adepticon?
Oh, so just a little thing called the Nationals for Star Wars Legion, and we actually live streamed them. So if you haven't seen them and you're listening to this, you could check it out at our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/c/the Fifth Trooper podcast. So check that out.
Perfect. And then my main reason to be there was I was going to soak up some Keyforge. I was going to play backup in case Jay needed me on stream or anything else, but I was going to get some Keyforge experience, and I was going to try and play on the Vault Tour because going in, the Vault Tour was super limited. Like I think they started at 32 players capped, and then they bumped it up to 64, and then eventually I'm not sure if the cap was 200 or they went unlimited, but at the end they had 122 players, which is pretty huge, especially since especially since knowing that, like, to begin with, it was capped until like the 2 days before the tournament, which means that a lot of people probably didn't come because they didn't think they were going to get a spot. And there probably would have been even more people had they opened it up right from the get-go.
Well, I mean, even bigger than that, not for those who don't know, Adepticon is a highly miniature focused con.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? Like most 99% of what they do there is miniatures. So for them to have such a strong showing for a card
but technically
game
like there wasn't even a ton of advance notice either, because Keyforge was always on the schedule for Adepticon when Adepticon came out. That's one of the reasons I was interested in going, but it didn't become a Vault Tour until they announced the Vault Tour, which was only maybe 2 months ago. And like going to a con for a lot of people takes a lot of planning. And I feel like next year there will be a lot more people, because you can expect that hopefully Adepticon next year will also be a Vault Tour.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would be good.
First of all, the Vault Tour was Archon survival format. And in case you don't understand what that is, you bring 3 decks, and then when you lose with a deck, you can't play that deck anymore. The great thing about this format is that elimination takes care of itself. You run out of decks, you're out of the tournament. And that's really nice. You don't have to worry about like Swiss pairings and tiebreakers and everything like that. It's just like, if you still have a deck left at the end of the day, you get to go to day 2. And then in day 2, it was single elimination. So if you lost, you're out. And I really like that about the format. What I don't like about the format is you just bring your best deck and you can just run with it. In that sense, I prefer diminishing returns, which is you bring 3 decks, and when you win with a deck, you can't play anymore. Now, the problem with that is it doesn't work for a larger tournament like this, because it was 6 rounds. So realistically, if you wanted to do that tournament, you had to bring 6 decks. And that doesn't really work out too well. 3 decks is a lot for some people. If you want to play casually, 6 decks is impossible, especially if you want them to be competitive decks.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. You could just bring one really, really good deck and just go.
Right, exactly. And I feel that's a little
What's
askew.
the point?
Yeah. But at the same time, there's still 1-game matches, and sometimes you have a bad draw and things don't go well and you lose that deck.
Yeah.
Even if that deck is amazing. And in that sense, the strategy of when you play your decks gets really interesting, because do you start off with your best deck? Do you save your best deck for second in case you have that bad matchup so that you have that one to rely on?
Right, but then you're like arguing with yourself, because you're like, okay, if I save my best deck for second or third, let's say, then I have the chance of losing, right? That the chance to lose is there. But if I play my best deck, depending on how good you think it is, then the likelihood of you winning is higher.
Yes. But at the same time, if you expect everyone else to start with their best deck and you bring out your second best deck, so after you lose and you move on to your second deck, everyone you're playing from then on has their second best deck, assuming
Yeah.
they played their first best deck. And that's where things get really interesting as to when you play it, because once you move to your second deck, everyone you play is playing their second deck.
Uh-huh.
So if you save your best deck for the second deck or the third deck, then your best deck will have a likelihood to be paired against worse decks, assuming everyone else played their best deck first. And this is the really interesting
Mhm.
part as to what order you want to play them in. I
Yeah.
personally went with the two deck. My first two decks are about even. I'm comfortable with them about the same. They feel about the same power level. Um, and so it wasn't a big decision for me. Like my third deck was just a deck I thought would do well. It turned out to be wrong. It did
Mhm.
horribly. But I've been struggling a lot with having a third good deck because I don't really buy decks online. I don't try and hunt decks down. I just play with what I open. And I open things that I earn from tournaments rather than going out and buying things, because that's how I want to digest this game. Now, on that note, the majority of the tournament was Archon Survival. Day one was Archon Survival. Day two was single elimination for whatever deck you had left over after day one. And then the finals was adaptive format. And adaptive means is each player plays their deck. In the second round, they swap decks, and in the third round, they bid chains to play whichever deck won both rounds
Oh,
if it
interesting.
goes to a round three. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That could be
interesting.
annoying.
Yeah, the way it worked out was, from what I read, is it went to a game three, and the owner of the deck that won both rounds, which was a lands deck, a library access Nepenthe Seed deck, he bid
Mhm.
chains, and his opponent was just like, "You can have it." I think he felt
Hmm.
like he wanted to play his deck if he was going to win, because that's how I would be. If I'm going to win, I want to win with my deck. I don't want to necessarily win with your deck.
Right.
Unfortunately, he ended up losing, and the lands deck ended up winning because that combination is really powerful. I actually in round three, I was on my second deck, and I went up against a not just a lands deck, but a OTK deck, one with we talked about this in a previous podcast, library access, Nepenthe Seed, key charge
Mhm.
to just draw your whole deck and win in one turn, which was annoying
Yep.
because I went into that knowing that I probably wasn't going to win. My decks aren't the strongest, and I'm just like, well, let's see what we can do. And I had him in
Yep.
check for my third key. He had first no keys, and then he just went off and he just won on the spot.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Though I made him play it out. It's like, I've never actually seen this, so I'm going to make you do it for a little while at least,
Well,
because there's
and
always the
like you
chance they
said,
screw up or it fizzles.
yeah, right. Yes.
But once
But like you
he had a third library access, that it was over. He's drawing three cards every time he plays a card. There's no way.
yeah, and like you said, like you were up too, so I mean, you could have potentially won if he
Yeah,
didn't get to the draw yet, or if you ramped up again. There was potential there for you to win. I don't,
go on.
it's OTK, but it's, I think we talked about this before, where it's not necessarily like, I don't, when I first heard about it, I thought it was like a turn one or turn two killer, which it potentially could be, but it's really more like turn five, turn six when you're going to see it come out. So you have a chance if you have a
Yeah.
good enough deck
Well, I think
to
the
key
best
up.
way to beat it is to gain amber as fast as you possibly can, because that deck
Hmm.
generally doesn't have a lot of ways. It's logos and it's untamed and some third. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they will have amber control, because
Right.
untamed and logos are some of the worst houses for amber control. Not the worst,
Hmm.
because logos has effervescent principle, which is Each player loses half of their amber, and you gain a chain. And then it has I forgot the name of the card, but every time you reap with a creature, you steal instead of just gaining. So there's control
Mm.
in there, but there isn't a ton of it. So if your third house isn't, say, shadows, you're not going to have a lot of amber control, and you're just trying to go for the combo. So if you can race them, you could beat them that
Oh,
way.
oh, it's a dimension door,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes, that's exactly what it is. Um,
Boom.
Now the only problem is that a racing deck that gains tons of amber really quickly goes right into the hands of shadows, which loves when you gain a ton of amber because then they'll just steal all of it. So like that's the way to beat it, but the other most popular and probably the most popular because it's easier to find metagame strategy is just playing shadows with a lot of stealing, and so that
Yeah.
doesn't really work out for you in the long run.
Yeah, isn't it's so funny because as I think you and I play you the most out of anybody I play.
Mhm.
And as you've evolved as a player and gotten different decks, like the play of the game changes too. And so, for instance, we were playing, what was it, last week or whatever, and my deck just started ramping up and just getting crazy amber. And then you had answers to that, right? And so I think
Yes.
we've talked about this before where it's like there's this weird middle ground of where you want to ramp up with the amber, but and like have all this amber and to get the key, but at the same time, you don't you don't want to get it all. And so what's the middle ground there? So, do I get exactly 6 this turn and then hold up some of this other combo stuff until next turn? Like what do I do to it's just
Well,
such a weird dynamic.
dynamic. Yeah. And it's
Mm,
all about what you're facing. Like if you know you're facing shadows, well, it's really difficult to play around because if you only gain a little bit amber, like you get exactly 6 or you get 7, just so if they steal one, then you're still be able to forge a key, but then they just like attrition you and they steal 2,
yeah.
and now they push you out of forging a key. But if you go like all ham and you gain like 10 amber and then they have a too much to protect or a bait and switch and they just steal even more from you, like it's really hard to play around shadows, which is why like I'm not a big fan of shadows. Like they're my least favorite house, and we'll talk about this once we get to that house episode. But like I don't
Yeah.
like that there isn't a great way to play around them because they seem to have an answer to every type of play. It's like I gain a lot of amber, I gain a little bit of amber.
Yeah.
They always could have something.
Well,
Now,
and I think people out there are going to argue with you and say there are answers, but I think what Nick is getting at is that the answers aren't as common as shadow is as common. So shadow is and the stealing and everything that shadow comes with, those decks are super common to get those combinations and get that amber stealing from a shadow deck. It's not unheard of to see 3 of those, 4 of those, you know what I mean?
yes.
In like one box. But the stuff that counters it is very rare. And because I know there's that one Sanctum card, that says, well, I think it's a creature. While this creature's out, your amber can't be stolen. So
Y'all, yes, Vault
there's
Keeper.
or
Love that card.
yeah, Vault Keeper, yeah. So there's answers, but he's not as common as like Shadow's just a
Yep.
very common thing, and
He
that's
is a
the
rare card.
problem,
Well,
right?
let's talk about it. So Vault Keeper is a sanctum creature, 4 power, 1 armor, and he just says your amber cannot be stolen. He's fantastic, but he's a
Yes,
rare, so
right.
he's hard to come by. But this also brings me to like my first tip: if you're going to a vault tour or any tournament, is another element of a tournament is that you get to see your opponent's deck list. At the beginning of the game, you swap deck lists. You get to look at what your opponent's doing, and
That's
so
true. Yep.
this brings another element is you not only need to know how to play your deck, you need to know what your deck is weak against you you need to be able to identify what your opponent's strategy is. If he's playing shadows,
Hmm.
does he have bait and switch but not too much to protect? Does he have little? Does he have like a Fagin and Urchins? Urchin is one power creature when it comes into play. One power
Mm-hmm.
elusive creature when it comes into play. Steel and Amber, and then Fagin is uh he can reap. I think it's reap or fight. He can return an Urchin from play back to your hand. So you
Yep.
just keep doing it like that, and you can just attrition somebody out in the Amber pool through playing Urchins. Or do they have the big swingy Steel Amber cards? Or do they have both? And then you need to be able to identify that and know what to play around. And that's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing for all of the houses. So keep that in mind if you're going to a big tournament and you've never played in one and you've never experienced that, is that you need to know both sides of it.
Yes. Yeah, and I think for some people that may be easier than others, right? Because I think not everybody has every card memorized,
Not everybody gets to
So
play
just
enough.
right, right. So maybe just look for the ones you know are going to be a problem. So if you see as shadow, like you should know bait and switch, like that's something you should absolutely know, and too much to
Yes.
protect. If they're playing logos, you want to check out if you have a high amber gain, you want to check out for effervescent principle. If they're
Yep.
playing untamed, you want to look for it's ritual, right? I forgot the name of it, but the ritual
Oh,
one.
Ritual of
And
Balance,
there's
which
so
is an artifact. If
yeah.
your opponent has 6 or more, you steal 1.
So it's more about understanding your decks and then saying, okay, what are the counters to this? And then go out and look for the counters and then
Yep.
just memorize maybe a couple cards from each house that you should, definitely pay attention to when playing a tournament. And then you could go, okay, they got this house. Here's the 3 cards I know of that'll counter my deck. Do they have those?
Yes. And ideally, you're going to want to know all the cards.
Yeah.
Ideally. Like realistically, if you want to
Or
play competitively, you need to know all of them. And you just know all of them by
yeah,
playing. And even then, it's going to be really tough to have played against the rares because they're rare.
yes.
Let's talk about the atmosphere of the Vault Tour. So, I've been to other larger tournaments for other games like Magic, a lot of the LCGs. The atmosphere and the community for Keyforge is awesome. I have never had so much fun at a tournament, and I got my butt kicked. We'll talk about exactly what my record was in a minute. I got my butt kicked, and I had so much fun. Like after playing in this tournament for like the month beforehand, I was sort of getting a little lukewarm on Keyforge, getting a little bored, which is often what happens to me. Like playing in this Vault Tour, even though I lost horribly, just reinvigorated my desire to play Keyforge. Now I just want to play it all the time. And so
Yeah.
that is just awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say that's like a lot of for anybody out there who's listening that doesn't get a chance to go out to these big conventions or shows. I don't think that's exclusive to Keyforge, where I feel like anytime I've gone, whether it's Keyforge or whether it's Legion or Magic, I always get like this high off of it where I'm like, oh my God, like that was so much fun. And it kind of gets me back into the game again.
Yes.
If I was feeling a little burnt out from like practicing, for that tournament or for that event. And so, yeah, those events always like kind of give you a kick in the butt again. And you're like, oh yeah, no, I remember why I love this game again.
And it's doubly so for Keyforge, just because even though it was a major tournament, it felt very casual. Everybody was super friendly. Everybody I played against was just awesome. And every game was just
Yeah.
fun, whether I won or lost. And it was just a great, great experience. So now let's talk about how I did. So I ended up going 1-3. I won my first round and then proceeded to just lose. My third game was against the Lands deck, which was kind of rough because I knew I probably wasn't going to win that unless like they just couldn't find their combo or whatever. And then my last game, my third deck was not good, but still I had a ton of fun.
Hmm.
And the important
Yeah.
thing is, even for having that terrible record, I ended up with 60 Amber Shards, which is crazy.
Yeah,
So you
that's a
get
lot.
you get 30 for signing up, you get 15 for a win, and you get 5 for a loss. and entry is $20, and it's just a crazy amount of amber. And so then, what did I do with that amber? Well, the prizes. If you've looked at the prizes on the prize wall, you've seen what you get, and I can tell you that
Mm-hmm.
they're even better in person. The playmats are really sweet. I was trying to decide between them. I didn't have quite enough amber to get both the key, what I ended up getting and a playmat, and what I ended up getting was the Vault Tour pin. And if you go to an event and you really want like a piece of like a prize that really highlights that you were at that Vault Tour, you have to get the pin because the pin is the only thing that is exclusive to that Vault Tour. It's the only thing that says the
Mm.
city and the state that that particular Vault Tour stop was at. And it costs 30 amber shards. It's a lot for a pin, but you also automatically get enough amber shards just for signing up.
I actually love that, and I think that's a brilliant idea because
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the times when you go to some of these tournaments and you travel to a convention, or you go through a lot of hassle to get to this convention. And yes, most of us are doing it for the love of the game, and that's why we do it. But it's always nice to walk away with something. And the fact that they give you enough amber shards to walk away with that pin that's like a collector's, commemorative pin for
Yep.
that vault tour is, I think, just genius.
Yes. And you will only be able to get that specific pin at that specific Vault Tour. And to me, that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
That
Yeah.
they just have that. Because the playmats are awesome, but they say Vault Tour 2019. They're not specific to that Vault Tour. They're specific to all
Mm.
Vault Tours for that year. And I assume next year they'll have 2020 playmats for the Vault Tour.
Well, I was gonna say that makes sense because from a printing and production standpoint, it's much cheaper to get pins made than it is to get those mats made. So to mass produce just a bunch of 2019 or 2020 mats, and then you do like 100 of those pins for the event, or however many, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, me too. It makes it so they can do more cooler prizes
Mm-hmm.
while still having something that's just for that.
Well, I mean, you walked away with it, so do you feel satisfied with that pin? I mean, it sounds like you do, but I think if I were to say, I think you feel like, hey, I didn't do as well as I would have hoped, but I did get this sweet pin.
Absolutely. And now I have this
Mm.
pin and I put it on my Keyforge lanyard with my house pins. And it's just like every Vault Tour I go to is going to have one of those pins from now on.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
was
and that's great.
extremely satisfied.
Perfect. Love it.
So now on to one more tip: practice physical games. I heard a lot of
Mm.
people complain they were struggling because they only play on the Crucible.
Mm-hmm.
And the Crucible takes care of a lot of your triggers and a lot of your steps. And if you're playing in a big tournament and you're playing with physical cards and in person, you have to remember those triggers, like remembering to forge your key at the beginning of your turn, remembering the order in which things happen. Like like for instance, library access into a wild wormhole.
Yep.
The Crucible does that for you automatically. You need to know how to do that in person. And so you want to practice that with your deck. And the next part is
Yep.
you need to practice with your deck. Because, like I said, I hadn't been playing a ton, and one of the biggest problems I had wasn't that my decks weren't powerful enough; it's that I hadn't played with them enough. I didn't know the specific things that my opponent was playing that would definitely affect my deck and affect my play style, and that hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've played Crucible, and quite frankly, like I'm sure my preference is physical game. I really I struggle following Crucible, and I like knowing what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? And I like to see it and I like to think about it. And sometimes with Crucible, just all the actions happen so fast and all the triggers happen so fast. And then I got to go back to the chat to see what you just did. And it just, for
Yes.
me, I'm not a huge fan of Crucible, and that respect. I love the fact that there's this website where we can play, and we don't have to be in person, and I can play with friends from all over the place. I absolutely love that. But yeah, the triggering system is a little intense, especially if you're really trying to focus on what just happened.
That's exactly how I feel. I do not play on the Crucible very often. When I do play, it's against friends that I already know who I either we have some time to kill and we want to play a game, or they're friends who live far away and I can't play with. I don't play with it just to play the game. I have digital games. Specifically right now it's MTG Arena that I play digitally for various reasons. One of them is just it's easier. I can just jump in a game with a random person. I don't have to think about it. You also get prizes for playing, and you have quests to complete, and I want that element in my digital game. So once
Yeah.
Keyforge moves to that type of thing, like they have an official online play program or app or whatever they want to do, I'm going to be all in on it. But until that happens, I'm going to play my games physically because I prefer the in-person experience, the that atmosphere over playing digital where you don't get that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's hard, like it's even hard for me to switch. Like I know a lot of people have been big fan of the new Magic one, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just hard for me to take those physical games and to transfer them into digital sometimes because I like to see what's going on. I like the physical feel of the cards in my hand. I like to be able to quickly do things that sometimes maybe a couple step process digitally.
You like the social interaction that like you can talk to people,
I do like the social interaction. Yeah.
you can set up chat with people to play online and you could talk to them and you can have video up, but it's still not the same as actually sitting across the table from a person in real life and playing the game. It's very different.
Yeah. And I like too, like when I'm playing people in real life, like let's say you have a card I've never seen before. I can be like, "Whoa, what is that card?" And then I feel like you and I can strike up a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And then I might learn something in addition because you're like, "Oh man, I was playing this game the other day that I did X, Y, and Z with this card." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I've never seen this card. Like this is crazy."
Oh yeah.
But it yeah, it like kind of sticks with me that education, I guess, of what just happened and the card and the conversation about the card.
Yeah, because like for example, I was playing a coworker a couple weeks ago, and I saw a combo that I'd never even thought about or seen with a card that I up to that point I did not like at all. And what it was
Mm,
it was Snecklifter, which is the shadows 2 power. When it comes into play, you take control of an opponent's artifact. The card's busted
mhm,
good. But it was with the I forgot exactly the name, Mars creature, the Think Drone, 3 power as a reap, you can archive one of your cards. And I saw that, and the Think Drone I've hated because it's just like I don't see a lot of situations where I want to archive my own cards. I'd rather have them in play. And my opponent had them both on the field. Like, oh my god, that is a stupid combo because the way Snicklifter works is even when he leaves play, you still keep that artifact, so you can use the Think Drone, put the Snicklifter back in your archive, and then play him again to steal another artifact, and you can just
yep.
steal all of your opponent's artifacts, and it's just ridiculous. And that's
Wow.
what happened. We had this. My opponent didn't see it, and so I was just like, hey, this is a really busted combo. So when you reap that guy, you're going to want to archive this guy, and it started up a conversation like that. And it's like it may have happened on the Crucible, probably would have, but I don't think it would have been the same.
Agreed. Yeah.
So now moving on to like the last topic, it was something that we were talking about at Adepticon, and I've thought a lot about it since then, and the question was, is Keyforge pay to win with the OTK decks, the lands decks with the busted shadows walking around? Is it more
Here we go.
important to have a good deck that you paid for and you found online with a amazing SAS rating and a amazing ARC or ADHD rating, is that more important than, is that necessary? Not even more important, is that you
Mm.
have to do that? And I'll let you talk about it first. What do you feel?
All right. So I guess I have two answers to this. One, I think it can absolutely be pay to play because you can get, for the most part, with the way the internet is now, right? You could get whatever deck you want, for the most part. But then on the other side, I feel like a lot of people are like us, where we like the thrill of the hunt. Like I think the thrill of magically opening one of these boxes, like when I got those horseman decks, even though they're okay, they're not great, but they're okay. But when I got two horseman decks, it my whole life was better for like the 5 minutes after that happened. You know what I mean? Like just the thrill of that was so amazing. I don't know that I could pull myself to go purchase a deck because, well, and maybe it's different for me because I'm not playing the vault tours. I'm not looking to win anything. I just love this playing this game. So the thrill of that hunt is so much better for me. But I don't know. I guess I could kind of see if I was really wanting to win and there was something that I wanted, like that OTK deck, maybe I would go buy it. Hmm. That's a tough thing to say because there's nothing against that, right? There's no rule against that.
Buying a deck?
It's Yeah, it seems shoddy,
Not at
but
all. I think
it's
it's encouraged.
it, right.
Well, let me
Hmm.
let me throw some
It's interesting.
some stats at you. So, the deck
All
that
right.
won, the name of the deck is, in case anybody hasn't checked it out, it's gasoline in quotation marks Maximilian common comma dungeon keeper. So gasoline Maximilian dungeon keeper. It has a SAS rating
Mm-hmm.
of 93, which is
Oof.
pretty high. Like my highest deck is 84 now. The runner
Yeah.
up, which is MX, so M as in man, X as in xylophone, uh,
Xylophone.
xylophone. Period. Hongo Nail Delgado. It has a SAS rating. I'm double checking right now because last time I checked, it had a SAS rating of 91. It has a SAS rating of 91. The the first place deck had an AERC rating of 53, and the Nail deck has a ARC rating, which is the combination of your amber control, your amber gain, your board control, your power of your creatures, of 67.5. So what
Hmm.
this tells me is that to an extent, you are probably going, if you want to be competitive, you're going to have to invest some money in some serious decks, some decks with a decently high SAS rating, or
Yeah.
just a lands deck, an OTK deck, just lands in general. Just being able to basically just draw your entire deck, that's extremely powerful. Whether or not you have a combo piece like Key Charge to go with it, or Effervescent Principle, so you just keep playing Effervescent Principle and keep your opponent on one amber for the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
game. You are going to need to probably invest in a deck like that. But on the flip side, just having the deck isn't enough. You still need to know how to play it. You still need to know what its weaknesses are. You still need to know the cards in Keyforge so that when your opponent presents his deck, you know what his game plan is, what the cards are that are detrimental to you, what you need to avoid, what you need to play around. You need to know all that, and I think that's more important than having a good deck, but having a good deck just adds to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I get it. Definitely from the competitive standpoint. Like, if I want to be competitive, the decks are available. Might as well, right? And if that's how the system works right now for you to be competitive on any level, then I guess you're almost forced into it.
Yeah, it's basically ends up just being like every other competitive game where like you need three decks, and if you want them all to be competitive, you're probably going to be spending at least $100 per deck if you go and buy them,
Mm,
or spend hundreds of dollars buying boxes to open a deck that's at this level.
So you're probably going to spend $100 a deck either way. It sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or, like I was saying before, I did not do well at the Vault Tour, and I had a ton of fun. If your goal is to win the Vault Tour, you're probably going to have to spend money one way or another. If your goal is to go to the Vault Tour, have an awesome time, play some great games, end up with cool prizes, whether you do well or not, or just spend your amber shards that you've accumulated through chainbound events, through registering your decks. That's awesome. Like, you will have an awesome
Hmm.
experience. So either way, I guess I'm saying go to a vault tour. If you have the opportunity, you have the means, go. If you're uncertain about a tournament, you've never been to a big tournament, go anyway. The atmosphere felt very casual, even though it was a serious tournament. And there were definitely people who were taking it very seriously, but most of the people, they were still having a good time. They were still having fun.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what's more important with this game. This is how I want to play this game.
Well, and I mean, if we're being honest about it, probably the reason behind that is because unlike Magic or some of these bigger games, there's not a ton of money online, right? Right. So
Right.
people can still go and have fun, and you're not like losing out
Unless you
on
really
tens of
want,
thousands of dollars.
your goal is
That
to get
chair.
that chair or that table. Did I tell you about the
Mm-hmm.
table?
No.
You can actually see, if you go and look at the stream for the tournament, they were using the table that
Yeah.
you could get. I'm not even sure how many amber shards it costs. I haven't looked that up, but
Oh
it's
my
really
god, that's
sweet.
amazing.
It's the gaming table with, the felt bottom and the depressed middle, and it's got Keyforge engraved on the ends, and then all the house symbols on the sides. It's really sweet. It's a little small for my taste because it's basically big enough for two players to play Keyforge on, rather than what I would get, which
Okay.
would be something to play board games on for, like, you know,
Right.
4 to 6 players, hopefully even 8 to sit around the
Still
table.
cool.
It's still really cool. So,
All right.
unless you have anything else, I think I'm talked out.
I do not. I am solid.
So, in conclusion, go to the Vault Tour. It's awesome.
Yes. I would say that about any game you play. If there's any game you play and you want to play any like slightly competitive Legion, Magic, Keyforge, X-Wing, anything, you should experience a competitive event once in your
And
life.
experience that
It's
community,
pretty amazing.
because the community for
Yes.
at those larger tournaments is going to be very different than the community for your local community.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
that's a big
Agreed.
thing we found out with Legion. And I could say the same
Yes.
thing for Keyforge. So yeah.
Broaden your horizons, my friends.
Indeed. And on that note, that is going to do it for this episode. Take it easy, everybody.
Goodbye.